Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust, turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to be. Hey everybody, welcome! Happy Sunday night. I hope you guys had a great weekend. I am broadcasting on 3 different networks right now. Can't mention the other 2. But hello TikTok, hello the other 2 networks, and everybody that's there. Let me get my stuff going here really quick on this one, so I can remember where I'm at. There we go, I need that. Let me get my buttons pushed. And let's go find that. That's done. It's hard because I got to multitask. I don't have an in-house producer to do this stuff, so shot. Okay. All right, we're good. Anyway, welcome. My name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour. I'm also the owner of the California Hospital Paranormal Investigation Team, based out of Sacramento, California. We're 45 strong up and down the state, which means if you think you have a paranormal need, we can get you, whether it's business or, for your home or whatever. We're pretty good about getting to you. We got people everywhere. So it's good to see everybody. I see you guys there. Just to let you know over here on TikTok that if you do gift or you have a message for me, it's hard for me to see from here, as far as your gifting goes. So there should be a moderator in there, a moderator or 2 in there to help you. So if you do gift or something, do me a favor, and then they'll thank you. I do have a goal of collecting 6 chatty popcorns tonight, if you can help me with that. I'm also going for 50,000 likes tonight. So if you could double tap that screen and show me some love, that'd be great. It's Sunday. Sunday is reading day for us, and we always read from a paranormal themed book. And we've been reading some true stories and some not so true stories. This weekend we start. We'll be reading this book through January. It's a very, very long book. But this weekend we start with the Spirits of Darkside of the holidays. Christmas is always so cheery. Hello, Marisa. Christmas is always so cheery. But this book kind of pulls you away from that cheer. It encompasses Christmas. It also encompasses New Year's, and it encompasses some of the winter months as well with stories. Shults is a good friend of mine. We've had her on my podcast a couple of times, and she's generously let us use this book every year to read Christmas stories for everybody. So I'm excited to get started on this. Haven't changed my Christmas backdrop yet. We will next weekend after Thanksgiving. But glad you guys are here. I hope you stick around. It's an interesting book. It can get really seriously. There's spooky stories in here, and there's also interesting stories. I'll put it that way. So I'll let you know, TikTok police, if you're out there and anybody gets offended, you don't have to stay here. Same thing over at the other places. You don't have to hang out. Okay, just don't turn me into the TikTok police. I will do my best, or the internet police. I will do my best to filter a lot of the stuff that's in this book. There's some stuff in here that does need to desperately be filtered. Hello, Elaine. I think that's you. All right, so let's get going here, and I'm going to read for about an hour, and I'm going to go ahead and read the foreword that she has because it's a pretty cool foreword. She's a very thorough researcher. I've had her on a few times for several different books that she's written, and yeah, like I said, it's nice of her to let us use this book every year. Okay, so we're going to be reading about Christmas legends, going back to Germany and different places like that, and you might have heard of some of these things, right? Some of these creatures. And then we're going to get into more modern stories, and some of them may not be ghost stories, but they're, like I said, they're winter stories related to winter, and some of them can get interesting. All right, guys, so here we go. Let's get going. And today I'm using my smaller tablet. This is my old tablet. So, Spirits of Christmas, The Dark Side of the Holidays by Sylvia Shults. Let me get in a position where the mic sounds good. There we go. This is my podcast studio. Here we go. A Macabre Inc. production. Macabre Inc. is an imprint of Crossroad Press digital edition published. Okay, so here we go. Let me guess, we can get going. Let me go here. Get to where we need to be. Give me a second. Lots of advertising. Okay. She'll love when they do that in the front of books. Okay. All right, so Spirits of Christmas, The Dark Side of the Holidays. Grab your popcorn and snacks and Hot cocoa, if you have hot cocoa, dim those lights, put the fireplace on, cover up, and away we go. So I'm looking at the table of contents. So here we go. Prologue by Stephen Lancaster. When you ask people to describe the scariest time of the year, typically they return with Halloween or October in general as the answer. I always found that to be a comical association. To me, Halloween is nothing but a novelty. In reality, it's no different than the months before it. You see these people every day. You know who they are. The only difference is for one night, everybody parades around a masquerade of ghouls and goblins. We know it's fake, and the only strangeness in your home are the decorations you place there. The month of October spins thoughts of cemeteries in my head. That is a faultless comparison. How can you be afraid of a cemetery when everybody there is dead? How can you be afraid of Halloween when the guy in the mask is a neighbor or your friend? Statistically, more people find themselves depressed, unalive themselves, and are filled with a plethora of dark emotions around the holidays. And when I say holidays, I am referring to Christmas and the bleak secrets kept within the month of December. There are two different people reading this. The first is nodding in agreement because they have been or are currently there. They've been to that place the best pill in the world can't fix. The other person is shaking their head in disagreement because Christmas to them has been nothing but joy and happiness. I'm contented by that, but there is a truth most people choose to ignore. There is a truth hiding behind all of the tinsel and carols and a red-nosed reindeer. The holidays can be the darkest of nights despite the overabundance of lights. Have you ever really focused on the lyrical content of many Christmas songs? You may accept the arrangements revolve around joy, but in all actuality, the words sung speak of sorrow, conflict, double check my time. Okay. Speak of sorrow, conflict, dying, loneliness, impoverishment, and even monsters. This reminds me of the modern day renditions of classic fairy tales and how dark, offensive, and disturbing the source content really was before becoming sugar-coated into edible entertainment for our children. What about the big red guy himself, Santa Claus? Research into his origin reveals Dutch descent, often referring to him as Sinterklaas. It is believed that pieces of the Father Christmas mythology contain a Wodan, a Germanic god. The midwinter pagan event of Christmas was related to a ghostly procession referred to as the Wild Hunt. To put it simply, the Wild Hunt signified a group of the dead frantically passing you by as if they were chasing something unseen. Of course, you didn't hear much about that, do you? It should go without saying that we as adults teach happiness, anticipation, and excitement to our children through bold faced lies. We make them believe in something that, beyond a shadow of a doubt, does not exist. Suddenly, all of the positive energy you typically correlate with Christmas doesn't appear so positive. But how does all of that measure up to the bumps of the night and the monsters under the bed? Look at it as if you were operating a car. The more gas you give it, the power increases, the speed accelerates, and the more impact it can make. Spirits need energy to thrive. They need a powerful energy. Mechanical devices, weather, and human emotion are at the top of the list. Whether it is a refrigerator with its high energy fields, a storm with ionic energy, or a person in deep love, or a victim of tragedy, spirits can, do, and will use that energy for whatever purpose they wish, good or bad. In the paranormal research world, lower temperatures result in higher fields of ionic energy. Strong storms have the same impact. Ionic energy can alter not only human behavior, but supernatural activity as well. Similar to how we observe levels of electromagnetic fields, EMF, to determine the potential level of a spiritual encounter. Ionic energy should be viewed no differently. They both act as a form of location and tools of measurement. Whether is a spirit and how powerful it is, measuring ionic energy and electromagnetic fields answers both of those questions. This isn't relevant in all regions of the world during the holidays, but in many areas, snowfall, ice, and cold weather are the norm. One rarely pictures Christmas having a desert backdrop. I think most readers would agree, especially those who have a background in paranormal research. The majority of ethereal convergence is at its apex and most predictable during the winter and catastrophic storms. However, are Mother Earth's natural occurrences all to blame for fueling paranormal experiences, or are they just a piece of a much larger puzzle? From my first paranormal experience as a child to recent occurrences that left me dumbfounded, they all came to me around the holidays, and there was severe emotional sensitivity taking place. Some of the strongest damaging and intimidating entities I have ever experienced didn't happen at the beach or on Independence Day or Easter. They happened in my home, where a jolly man in a red suit was supposed to make an appearance. Instead, something much darker did. Stephen Lancaster is both a leading innovator and expert in the field of paranormal research. His exploration into the supernatural spans nearly 30 years. He authored the best-selling book, A True Case Files of a Paranormal Investigator, True Accounts of the Paranormal, in 2012. He is also the author of Dark Spirits, A Man Terrorized by Supernatural, and Norman the Doll That Needed to Be Locked Away, 2018. Here's the introduction. So here we go, you guys. And just like I said, don't turn me into the TikTok police. I'm going to do my best to avoid, unnecessary, stuff to upset people. All right. Double tap that screen. Let's show me some love, you guys. 50,000 likes. Can we do that tonight? And again, I'm collecting 6 chatty popcorn. If you can help me with that. All right, everybody, welcome. Here we go. And I'll be reading for about an hour. Okay. It's the most wonderful day of the year, and it's loaded with ghosts. They say that the veil, and by the way, before I get going, Sylvia Shults does her own publishing, self-publishing, so I do have full permission from Sylvia Shults to read this book online. Now we go. They say the veil between this world and the next is thinnest at Halloween, but there's still plenty of spillover at other times of the year. The dead of winter is a prime time for spookiness. December isn't just for Christmas. Hanukkah celebrates one of the miracles of the Jewish faith, when 1 day's worth of oil for the temple lamps lasted for 8 days. Kwanzaa, too, gives a nod to the bright happiness of the season. Maybe we're so eager to bring light to this time of the year because it's pretty bleak. Take away all the Festival of Lights celebrations, whether religious or secular, and you're left with cold gray days and even colder nights. And those nights are long. For centuries, we've chosen to have celebrations around the winter solstice, the longest night of the year. There's something in our human nature that wants to fight the darkness. This book itself is a celebration of the weirdness that has swirled around the Christmas season for many centuries. Within these pages, you'll find stories to warm your heart and tales to chill you, just as effectively as a cutting December wind. You'll find creatures of Christmas folklore from ages past, monsters that will haunt your dreams for more than the dreaded phrase, batteries not included, or even the chilling, some assembly required. You'll also find some fairly creepy tales that just happen to take place in the darkest, coldest part of the year. Not all Christmas ghost stories have cheerful, redemptive endings, like A Christmas Carol. Even in Dickens' book, there's a fair amount of creep factor, and the ghost of Christmas yet to come. Not all winter ghost stories take place beside a welcoming, crackling, cozy fire. We've started to embrace this chance to revisit Halloween weeks later. In 2015, the movie Krampus made $61.5 million at the box office. Recent years have also seen many commercial haunted houses realizing the potential of this out-of-season spookiness. There are now Krampus-themed haunted houses operating in Phoenix, Austin, Nashville, Denver, Green Bay, and many other cities. And yes, Krampus plays in Peoria, the Haunted Infirmary, in Illinois' top 10 rated haunt on the grounds of Peoria State Hospital in Bartonville, switches gears in December and welcomes Krampus to its spooky halls. Even Disneyland gets in on the fun, as the Haunted Mansion is transformed into a Nightmare Before Christmas theme ride. And I'm going to add really quick, Universal Studios, I don't know if it's every year, but the last couple of years they have had, for their Halloween Horror Nights, they have had a Christmas theme haunted house. Most of these haunts are simply called Krampus, a haunted Christmas, but some use the holiday as a chance to get creative with groan-inducing holiday puns. The Fright Before Christmas, Santa's Sleigh, Jingle Hell, and A Nightmare on 34th Street are just a few of these haunt names. Chamber of Horrors in New York even lets you get your picture taken on Santa's lap, in case you're still planning your Christmas card. And for those of us who still feel warm and fuzzy around the holidays, some haunted houses offer a $3 discount for haunt goers who bring a toy to donate to charity. Some of these stories were collected centuries ago. Some of them were told to me by people who experienced them. All of them are true in the sense that they held truth for the people who were there and who later shared them with others. They were true at the time, and that's good enough for me. That is my goal in writing this book, to share all of these marvelous, terrifying, wondrous stories with you. The book is divided into several sections for your reading pleasure. God Rest You Merry Gentlemen takes a look at the Victorians and their passion for ghost stories at Christmas. We Wish You a Merry Christmas, or Else, introduces some bizarre Christmas customs and looks at the raucous side of the season as it used to be celebrated. He Sees You When You're Sleeping introduces the monsters and demons of Christmas. In the Bleak Midwinter describes unsettling events that unfolded in the coldest, darkest part of the year. The Darkest Midnight in December is a look at tragedies that happen to take place in that month. 'Tis the Season is a collection of ghost stories all through the month of December. And It Came Upon a Midnight Clear gathers ghost stories that happened on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. So decorate your tree, whip up some eggnog, hang up the stockings, and don't forget to check under the bed. Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night. So here we go, everybody. We're starting out with God Rest You Merry Gentlemen, the Victorians. Hope everybody's having a good evening. So, why tell ghost stories at Christmas? That ship sailed on November 1st, didn't it? Ho, 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 not so fast. Take away the brightly colored lights, the promise of a full stocking, and the breakneck shopping frenzy, and you have what is admittedly a very bleak time of year, December. December marks the turning of the year, the shortest days and the longest nights. For centuries, it was the perfect time to curl up with a good ghost story. In 1891, in the introduction to an anthology of Christmas ghost stories entitled Told After Supper, the British writer Jerome K. Jerome wrote, "Whenever 5 or 6 English-speaking people meet around a fire on Christmas Eve, they start telling each other ghost stories. Nothing satisfies us on Christmas Eve but to hear each other tell authentic anecdotes about specters. Part of this hunger for the tale of ghostly revenants came simply from the time of year Christmas is celebrated. This went back centuries, long before the Victorian era. The Puritan leader Oliver Cromwell was also the Lord Protector of England, which meant that he got to make the rules for a while. In the mid-1600s, Cromwell tried hard to abolish the celebration of Christmas altogether. After all, he argued, nowhere in the Bible does it expressly say that Christ's birthday is on December 25th. As a matter of fact, shepherds in the Holy Land watched over their flocks by night in the springtime, April or early May. It wasn't until the 4th century that Pope Julius I fixed December 25th as the date to celebrate the birth of Christ. The Protestants also thought that celebrating Christmas smacked of Catholicism, which they were eager to abolish. So Christmas was a non-starter for quite a few centuries in England, unless you were in the Catholic minority. December 25th as the date for Christmas was not an arbitrary choice for the early Christians. Both Yule and Sol Invictus, the festival of the unconquered sun, commemorated the winter solstice. The symbolic connotations of these holidays coincided with the Christians' belief that the Son of God had come to the world. Pope Julius I simply co-opted the dates that were already significant to pagan Romans and Northern Europeans. Of course, this meant that the raucous pagan celebrations, the Saturnalia parties, and the topsy-turvy turnarounds got brought into early Christmas celebrations too. The winter solstice was also considered to be the spookier of the two solstices. Rather than long hours of daylight and a short night, the winter solstice marked the turning of the year with the shortest day and the longest night. The increased hours of darkness meant, of course, that spooks and monsters and things that go bump had a lot more time to roam the earth during the winter months. It brought to mind the death of the sun, and the thinning of the veil between worlds. The Victorian Christmas celebration, then, which already made heavy use of pagan symbols, like Yule logs, holly leaves, and even Father Christmas, also embraced the holidays, nodding acquaintance with the supernatural. This helped to create one of the Victorian era's most enduring holiday traditions, the Christmas ghost story. Even Christmas games of the period held an element of terror. The popular game of Snapdragon involved putting raisins, plums, or almonds in a bowl of brandy, and then setting the brandy on fire. Players tried to snatch a raisin out of the flaming bowl and pop it into their mouth to extinguish it. Another game had the players attempting to bite apples which were tied to one end of a stick. The other end had a lighted candle stuck to it. The phrase, "Don't try this at home, kids," had not been invented yet. Other games smacked of uh, sadomasochism. The game of hot cockles involved putting your head in someone's lap while trying to guess who was hitting you from behind. The kneeler, who was it, put their hand behind their back, palm up. The other players took turns smacking the palm in an anonymous low five. Shooing the wild mare was a similar guessing game, which involved a whack on the foot. But after the brandy's blue flames had died down, after the Christmas goose was picked down to the bones, after the last candle had guttered to a sullen yellow glow, then then came the ghost stories, and what stories they were. The Kit Bag, 1908, by Algernon Blackwood, tells of a man packing a haunted suitcase on Christmas Eve in preparation for an overseas journey. Mrs. J.H. Riddle wrote A Strange Christmas Game in 1863 about a brother and sister who spent Christmas in a haunted house and witnessed the ghostly reenactment of a murder. And speaking of games, Smee by A.M. Barrage, 1931, is a real spine tingler. A house full of partygoers are playing hide and seek on Christmas Eve in a big old rambling country house when they discover during the game that an extra player has snuck in and joined them. All these tales and more can be enjoyed. One of the most famous Christmas-themed ghost stories is another tale of hide and seek. This one quite a bit more gruesome than atmospherically chilling. Smee. This story is sometimes presented as a true ghost tale, but it has also been through so many incarnations that it should more truly be considered an urban legend. The following is just one of half a dozen versions of the story. The story is set sometimes at Bramshill House in Hampshire, England. Originally built in the 1600s, it was renovated extensively over the centuries. The current manor house was once owned by Sir John Cope, and it is his daughter, Anne, whose ghost now haunts the mansion. Anne was married on Christmas Day. During the wedding celebration, Anne suggested the guests all play a game of hide and seek. The guests all scattered throughout the huge country home. Anne scampered to a little used part of the house, where to her delight she found a large oak chest. She climbed inside and pulled the lid down on top of herself. It was a good hiding place, much too good. 50 years later, someone suspecting Cope descendant opened the ornately carved chest and got a horrifying surprise. Anne's mummified remains were still dressed in her wedding gown. Scratch marks on the inside of the lid were a gruesome testimony to her final hours. So like I said, I'm going to be careful with these so TikTok doesn't have a fit because a lot of these stories are like this. So I hope you guys are enjoying this. Happy holidays. Oh my. In 1953, Bramshill House was sold out of the family and turned into a police training center. Many cadets, so the story goes, have seen a lady dressed in a long white gown drifting around the mansion, or caught whiffs of the sweet scent of her wedding bouquet. Sure, it's an urban legend of sorts, but it's also kind of a cool story. And, as urban legends go, this one has staying power. Its origins can be traced back even to before the Victorian era. The story can be found in a poem by Thomas Haynes Bailey, 1797-1830, sometimes called The Ballad of the Mistletoe Bride. The poem and the story illustrate the technique of setting the tragic story at Christmas. It's a juxtaposition of a joyful time of year and a joyous occasion, which is a wedding, yeah, with the main character's horrifying final moments being buried alive. The Victorians just loved this stuff. As far back as Shakespeare's time, Christmas was associated with wandering spirits. In Hamlet, for example, the guard Marcellus tries to explain the sudden disappearance of Hamlet's father's ghost. Some say that ever against that season comes, wherein our Saviour's birth is celebrated. The bird of dawning singeth all night long. And then they say, no spirit dares stir abroad. The nights are wholesome, then no planets strike. No fairy takes, nor witch hath power to charm. So hallowed and gracious is the time. Maybe Marcellus was doing his own version of whistling past the graveyard, or hiding under the covers, so the ghost can't get him. But this bit of ghost lore tells us a lot about the Victorian attitude of later years towards the ghosts. Okay? Oh, wow, it's going to do this. Come on. Towards the spirits. And there were spirits aplenty running around Victorian England. But according to the lore, Christmas Eve was the one night of the year when the ghosts were not allowed to roam the earth. Maybe that's why the Victorians felt so safe telling spooky stories on Christmas Eve. They could talk about ghosts all they wanted to, with no fear of drawing unwanted attention from the spirit world. Another theory of the Victorian fondness for ghost stories is that people of the era were just glad to have a safe, well-lit place to tell those stories. The Industrial Revolution, of the late 18th and early 19th centuries marked a move towards living in big cities. As England's population moved into urban areas, nature and the darkness found there after the sun went down became unfamiliar and frightening. People of the early 19th century had only recently gotten used to the luxury of having dependable sources of light after nightfall. Gas lighting was invented in the 1790s, and gas lighting of streets and buildings began in the early 1800s. Most streets in London were lit by gas lamps as early as 1816. But gas as a means of lighting homes was distrusted for the first 50 years or so. There's also a theory that gas fixtures themselves contributed to the epidemic of Victorian ghost sightings. There's a reason the bright interior decorating of the Georgian period, all that beautiful white and gold decor, turned dark and gloomy in the Victorian age. Dark Victorian wallpaper hid soot better. Gas fixtures began to show up in city homes and manor houses in the mid-19th century, and sometimes they leaked gas and tainted the air with noxious fumes. A tightly laced corset was only one reason for a well-bred Victorian lady to faint. Another reason was lack of oxygen in gas-lit parlors. There's a theory in paranormal circles that gas leaks sometimes led to hallucinations of wispy figures or shadows seen out the corner of eyes. This would go far towards explaining the explosion of ghost sightings in the Victorian era. Whether or not 19th century ghosts were the product of leaky gas fixtures, we have the Victorians to thank for the wealth of supernatural themed literature. The late 19th and early 20th centuries saw countless Christmas gift books published that were entirely devoted to ghost stories. These weren't cheap dime novels either. These were classy upscale publications of quality, design, and prestigious writing. Contributors to these gift books and annually published anthologies included Edgar Allan Poe, Mary Shelley, Nathaniel Hawthorne, and Rudyard Kipling. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle actually introduced the character of Sherlock Holmes in A Story for a Christmas Annual. But the granddaddy of old Christmas ghost stories is, of course, A Christmas Carol. This most beloved of Dickens' works was written for a most unsentimental reason. The author had bills to pay. In October 1843, Charles Dickens was hurting for money. He'd gotten married in 1836, and he and his wife had already produced 4 children, with number 5 on the way. Dickens had an almost pathological horror of being in debt. His father had been thrown into debtor's prison when Charles was 12 years old. The grown-up Charles Dickens refused above all else to put his own family through such a shame and degradation. He needed a project to raise some fast cash. He had an idea for a story of a miserly old curmudgeon whose grumpy outlook in life is changed by visits from 3 spirits. Dickens was actually recycling material he had already written. In the Pickwick Papers, Dickens wrote, "The story of the goblins who stole a sexton." This told the story of Gabriel Grubb. And isn't that just the perfect name for a gravedigger? A drunken sexton who chooses to spend Christmas Eve digging a grave instead of celebrating the holiday. I suppose someone's got to do it, but hey, Christmas is Christmas. Grubb is dragged off by the goblins and has a change of heart after the Goblin King shows him a series of visions that prove his life is worth living after all. Dickens took this theme and embroidered it. Instead of visions, Ebenezer Scrooge received actual visits, from ghosts. First, his late partner, Jacob Marley. Then the spirits of Christmas past, Christmas present, and Christmas yet to come. For good measure, Dickens tossed in a ridiculously sentimental subplot involving Tiny Tim Cratchit, the kind of sickly poor child the Victorians loved to weep over. He wrote the book in a fever of production. It was on his publisher's desk in less than 6 weeks. And the gamble paid off. Big time. A Christmas Carol was released on December 19th, 1843. The original print run of 6,000 copies sold out within 3 days. Since then, it has never been out of print. Taking on a life far beyond the printed page, it has been produced as a play, a musical, and many movies. The earliest being a 1908 version by Thomas Edison. Dickens kept up with the fashion of the day, with the fashion of telling ghost stories at Christmas, until his death in 1870. Dickens produced a number of Christmas annuals and invited other writers to contribute to these anthologies. With the success of A Christmas Carol, Dickens could pay off the debt that had led to his creation. Dickens was set for life. In fact, he was able to leave both his wife, nice, from whom he had separated in 1858, and his mistress, an actress he met in 1857, independently wealthy for the rest of their lives. Not too shabby. Incidentally, it seems that Charles Dickens had joined the cast of Spirits, who populate his best-known work. In life, he spent time at the Omni Parker House Hotel in 1867 and 1868, while touring the United States giving readings of his works. He could be heard in his room practicing his delivery late into the night. In modern times, guests who stayed in the Dickens suite reported seeing the ghostly image of the great author himself in a large mirror that used to hang in the room. The phantom would appear in the mirror, pacing back and forth, reading A Christmas Carol out loud. When spoken to, the ghost would vanish. Many hotel guests also reported that the elevator would stop on the third floor of the hotel, even though no one had pressed the button. Was it the ghost of Dickens heading back to his room? The haunted mirror spent many years hanging on the wall at the hotel until it was moved a few blocks away to the Tremont Temple Baptist Church. It now hangs on the second floor at the very end of the hallway. It wasn't only famous writers who contributed to stories these Christmas annuals. Folks who didn't have a literary reputation to uphold, but who had an interesting tale to tell, often shared their experiences with the magazines. A Major McGregor shared his tale with Real Ghost Stories, which was the celebrated Christmas edition of the Review of Reviews. At the end of 1871, the Major went to Ireland to visit a relative who lived in Dublin. In January 1872, this relative's husband fell ill. The Major set up with the sick man for several nights, until it seemed a corner had been turned. On that night, the Major felt confident about leaving the patient to sleep alone, and he himself went to the guest room for some much-needed rest. He told the footman to wake him if the patient suddenly took a turn for the worse. Then he went to bed. The Major was awakened some time later by someone giving him a push on the shoulder. He came awake immediately and said, "Is there anything wrong?" He got no answer. Just another push. The Major, thinking it was the footman, got annoyed. Excuse me for 1 second. And snapped, "Can you not speak? And tell me if there is anything wrong." His visitor stayed silent. The Major, not wanting another shove on the shoulder, made a grab in the darkness and caught a human hand, warm, plump, and soft. Obviously, not the hand of the footman. The Major asked, "Who are you?" but again got no answer. He tried to pull the person towards him, but he couldn't. "I will know who you are," the Major cried. He held the stranger's hand tightly in his right hand and explored the arm with his left hand. He felt the wrist and an arm enclosed in a tight-fitting sleeve of some heavy winter fabric with a linen cuff. But when he felt up past the elbow, the arm just stopped. The major was seriously freaked out by this and dropped the hand he was holding. The clock struck 2, and the major knew there would be no more sleep for him that night. The next morning, the major told the household what had happened. The servants of the house had a ready explanation. It must have been the master's old Aunt Betty, who lived in the upper part of the house for many years, and who had died at a very great age over 50 years before. Not all Christmas ghost stories were published in magazines. Many families had their own collections that were brought out to be enjoyed and added to year after year. One of the most celebrated personal collections was written by Lord Halifax. Published in 1936, it was still available today. It is still available today. His son wrote years later about his fond memories of Christmas. As long as I can remember, my father's ghost book was one of the most distinctive associations of Hickleton, the family home. He kept it always with great care himself, from time to time making additions to it in his own handwriting, and bringing it out on special occasions such as Christmas, to read some of the particular favorites aloud before we all went to bed. I'll recollect my mother protesting, although I think I almost inevitably to no effect. Okay, so the victims themselves were us children, fascinated and spellbound by a sense of delicious terror, never failed to ask for more. I myself would have been right at home with the Halifax children. So here, in the spirit of Christmas and of the grand old tradition of the season, I offer this collection of true ghost stories. I hope it brings you just as much wonder and terror as Lord Halifax's stories brought to his children. All right, guys, I'm going to take a quick drink of water, okay? And we're going to get into this. We're diving in. Hope you guys are liking this. Double tap that screen. Trying to get 50,000 likes tonight. Here we go. We wish you a Merry Christmas, or else. Bizarre Christmas traditions. Okay? Christmas. Hasn't always been Tiny Tim saying, God bless us, everyone. Centuries ago, it was more a matter of every man for himself. It was a time of carousing, of turning the social order of things upside down. It was, in short, a time for shenanigans. Even in modern days, we still cling to a cozy Victorian ideal of the holidays. Say, Christmas. And most of us will reflexively think of family gathered around a colorfully lit tree, a tree with presents piled underneath. Whether or not that imaginary family will get along with each other without the lubricating effects of copious amounts of rum-spiked eggnog is another matter. But before the Victorians came along and settled, Christmas was not the quiet domestic holiday of Dickens, one-horse sleigh and rides, and career and Ives prints. Instead, it was a holiday of boisterous revelry, sort of a mashup of Halloween, New Year's Eve, and Mardi Gras. The Romans started the custom of giving gifts at the solstice celebration. Winter solstice, the shortest day and the longest night of the year, comes from the Latin for the sun stands still, although the winter solstice was called bruma to distinguish it from solsticia, the summer solstice. Saturnalia and Calendae were both well-lived Roman holidays. At Saturnalia, slaves were allowed the run of the house, and masters were obliged to serve them. And Calendae marked new beginnings. The 4th century writer Libanius, it's going to be one of those days, had this to say about the celebrations. The feast of the feast of Calendae is honored as far as the Roman Empire stretches. Everywhere is singing and feasting. The rich enjoy luxury, but the poor also set better food than usual upon their tables. The desire to spend money grips everybody. People are not merely bountiful to themselves, but to their fellow humans. A stream of present pours itself out on all sides. The Calendae bring all work to a halt, and allow humans to surrender themselves to pure pleasure. Saturnalia was just one of the many holidays that made up the Roman calendar, but it was one of the biggest. The lower classes looked forward to the role reversal that came at the turning of the year. Household slaves, especially, jumped at the chance to be in charge for a while, to be served by their master and mistress. Even after the fall of the Roman Empire, this role reversal at Christmas time continued to be one of the few perks enjoyed by the lower classes. The custom of wassailing, or going door to door to beg for alms, began way back in the early Middle Ages. The practice continued all through the Middle Ages as a way to keep the social and political order stable. You think giving the girl who cuts your hair an extra tip at Christmas is a new thing? Think again. In medieval times, tradesmen would ask their customers for gifts or largesse at the holidays, and sometimes they would threaten retribution if refused. A morning newspaper chucked under a hedge instead of being delivered to your welcome mat is one thing. To have someone responsible for guarding your house slack off or actively invite thugs to ransack your home while they stand by watching is something else entirely. This was a problem as far back as 1490 England, when the Corporation of London ordered the servants of city officers to stop the custom of asking for Christmas offerings from victualling trades, sometimes with menaces if refused. So the lower classes were discouraged from wassailing. That didn't stop them. Even the practice of caroling was frowned upon by the upper classes, both in England and later in America. Through colonial times up into the early 19th century, caroling was not the innocent, light-hearted practice we think of today. Carolers of yesteryear were not content to stand outside in the cold and sing, in the faint hope of getting a mug of hot chocolate and a cookie or three. Quite the opposite. In fact, old-time carolers were a rowdy, often destructive bunch. Consider the lyrics to "We Wish You a Merry Christmas." Now bring us the figgy pudding and bring it right here. We won't go until we get some, so bring it right here. We sing these lyrics without a second thought, but when that song was written, the singers were a lot more aggressive in their demands. They weren't kidding about it. Imagine that you're someone fairly high up on the social ladder, either in England or in one of the big American cities, Philadelphia, Boston, someplace like that. You're relaxing with your family on Christmas Eve. You'll wait until New Year's to exchange gifts because that's a great way to acknowledge fresh beginnings. For now, you're content to enjoy some quiet time with your loved ones, but you keep one ear cocked for trouble. And there it is, a pounding on the door. The maid hurries to open it, fearing it'll break under the fists of the drunken hooligans. Your house clearly isn't their first stop of the evening. A half dozen thugs swagger into your front parlor, their boots tracking snow and mud onto your carpet. One of them, clearly the leader, calls himself the Lord of Misrule. He yells at you to bring out several bottles of your best wine and plenty of good food. Cake, if you have it, and he knows you do. The rowdies spend an hour or so swigging claret and mashing cake crumbs into the doilies. But what can you do? The rowdies, but what can? I'm sorry about that. You do, yeah. You can't tell them to leave. It's tradition. They finally leave, and you breathe a sigh of relief. You're out a couple of bucks, since they demanded money too, and your parlor is trashed. But they're gone. That's over until the next bunch shows up. It's going to be a long holiday season. It's not too much of a stretch to say that Clement C. Moore, with his poem A Visit from St. Nicholas, single-handedly turned society's perception of Christmas 100%, 180 degrees. With this poem, better known by its first line, "'Twas the night before Christmas," Moore completely upended the perception of Christmas as a time of riotous misrule. Instead, he introduced the character of St. Nicholas as the polar opposite of the Lord of Misrule. Instead of a bunch of rowdy young men busting into the house uninvited, one man solo comes into the house. He hasn't been invited in either. But he comes in silently, without the boisterous good cheer of the wassailers, a good cheer that could turn ugly in a moment. St. Nicholas is obviously a member of a lower working man class. He holds the stump of a pipe clenched in his teeth, which was an affection of the laboring class. Dandies smoke pipes with lawn stems. Working men prefer to snap their pipe stems off short. Also, he opens up a peddler's pack, but he poses no threat to the household. As a matter of fact, St. Nicholas displays his own largesse. Instead of demanding gifts from the narrator, fine food and liquor, St. Nicholas leaves gifts for the household. And most importantly, instead of threatening the narrator, we won't go until we get some. St. Nicholas especially lets the narrator know he has nothing to fear. His appearance and behavior, although startling, are absolutely non threatening. At about the same time, Clement Moore published A Visit from St. Nicholas in 1822. Society's opinion was turning against public displays of drunkenness at Christmas. It was around this time that people began to buy Christmas gifts for each other and for their children, rather than making them. Although even then, a handmade gift, or at least a hand-finished gift, was much preferable to a completely store-bought Christmas. Merchants wanted to make their shops safe, appealing places, free from the unwanted attentions of drunken revelers. Instead of being reported in regular newspaper articles, accounts of rambunctious gang behavior started to show up in the police blotter section of the paper. The boorish behavior, frowned upon by genteel society, was quite literally marginalized, and it eventually faded. Wassailing had largely died out in England by the 1930s, even though the folks who used to practice the obsolete custom were still alive and well. Social programs by then were helpful enough that the poor no longer needed to beg, even at Christmas time. By the 1970s, though, groups in the east and west of England started up again, singing traditional wassailing carols and offering drinks of beer or cider from the wassail bowl. These groups do collect money in exchange for their caroling, but now the money raised is donated to charity. One of the most puzzling and, to modern eyes, grotesque example of a Christmas ritual reversal is the English custom of the hunting, killing, and displaying of wrens. Wrens are the smallest bird native to Europe, and killing one has for centuries been regarded as a cowardly act, sure to bring bad luck down on the perpetrator. This belief goes all the way back to the ancient Greeks and Romans. The early medieval Irish writer, Cormac of Cashel, said that the wren got its old Irish name from Druian, or druid bird. The ancient Irish used the wren for fortune telling, but by the 17th century, the Irish were killing wrens at Christmas. This was also a custom in the British Isles and in the south of France. Teenage boys would carry a holly branch with bunches of dead birds and colorful ribbons tied to it from house to house, displaying their grisly trophies and asking for money. Later, the dead bird was carried in a box, and the wren boys would put on small skits or mock combats for the entertainment of their audiences. This custom continued through the 18th and 19th centuries. Most of the time, the tiny corpse was was carried around and displayed on a ribbon bedecked bier. But in England, by the 19th century, the hunters had switched to putting the wrens alive into a box. The box, too, was festively decorated, with colored paper or ribbons hung from the top, two candles at the sides, and glass windows on either end so the captive birds could be viewed. This box was slung between two poles and carried around to accompany the carolers. This method of capturing the birds alive took more skill and meant that the birds could be released safe and sound after Christmas. Wren hunting along with caroling and wassailing was one of the several ritual reversals carried on by working class people in the 17th through 19th centuries. Much earlier than that, though, members of higher social classes were getting up to their own Christmas shenanigans, and some took it, well, a little too far. Most of the records we have of the medieval period in Europe come down to us, excuse me for that, from the church, as priests and monks were generally the record keepers. By the 12th century, some of the clergy in France had developed a Christmas celebration that evoked the pagan merrymaking of ancient Saturnalia. They called it the Feast of Fools, or I can't say the other word, the Feast of Fools, or we'll say donkeys. Say that? I can't say the other word. Or subdeacons, and it was spread rapidly from France into Flanders, and then England. The point of this originally was for the higher ranking clergy to practice humility by letting the lower orders lead the worship services at New Year's. Soon, though, it evolved into a general Christmas time celebration, with the rites being changed to suit the burlesque revelry. As early as 1236 and 1238, Robert Grosseteste, Bishop of Lincoln, had to issue an edict forbidding his clergy to completely upend the order of worship. They were pretending to worship as demons. Whoa. In 1333, John de Grandison, Bishop of Exeter. Hi, Pamela. I think it's Pamela. Let me see. Oh, sorry. Either way, hello to people in my chat room over there. Began a 30-year campaign to abolish the Feast of Fools at his cathedral. Apparently, the lower clergy talked the choir boys into throwing mud at each other during services on the 3 holy days after Christmas. The congregation loved it. They dissolved in disorderly laughter and illicit mirth. But the bishop was not amused. By the early 15th century, the practice was no longer tolerated. There was, however, a much more enduring tradition, the choosing of the boy bishop. In the early 10th century in Germany, the junior clergy and assistants of cathedrals were recognized and honored by being allowed to hold procession on 3 holy days after Christmas. Deacons on St. Stephen's Day, priests on St. John's Day, and choir boys on the feast day of the Holy Innocents. The children slaughtered by Herod's men in their search for the infant Jesus. Makes sense. This spread quickly to France and England and remained a custom throughout the Middle Ages. In the 12th century, the cult of St. Nicholas of Myra, patron saint of children, became popular in Western Europe, and this reinforced the popularity of the tradition of the Feast of Boys. The boy bishop was chosen by the choir boys, being one of them. He had to be good looking, with a fine singing voice. The boy bishop was dressed in a jeweled mitre and velvet vestments, embroidered with gold. He and his retinue paraded around the town, collecting alms in return for singing at monasteries, convents, and the houses of nobles. Sometimes the money collected was donated to the boys' school. In other areas, the boy was allowed to keep whatever money was left over after the cost of providing a large supper for his mates on the feast day of the Holy Innocents. As ritual reverses went, the choosing of the boy bishop to preside over services was pretty low key. It was easier for the clergy in charge to control the boys and regulate their celebrations as opposed to the rowdiness of adult tradesmen. Plus, this custom was less of a reversal and more of a reaffirmation of Christ's teaching of the special relationship of children to the kingdom of heaven. All right. All right, we start from the chapter He Sees You When You're Sleeping, Creepy Characters of Christmas. As you lie there, snug in your bed, with sugar plums dancing in a conga line in your imagination, keep in mind that Santa Claus isn't the only mythical figure that might be sliding down your chimney and creeping around under your tree in search of milk and cookies. There are plenty of reasons to be afraid of the dark in the deepest part of the winter. Let's meet the monsters of Christmas. Krampus, the demon of Christmas. Krampus is perhaps the most familiar of the Christmas monsters, creatures that make the Grinch look as cuddly as Rudolph. In recent years, he has become the grand old man of alternative Christmas celebrations. Krampus is a demonic-looking figure from Germanic folklore. He's got black skin, covered with short black fur, a long, lolling red tongue, and one cloven hoof, and one human foot. He's half demon and half goat. and he revels in punishing children who've landed themselves on Santa's naughty list. Krampus sometimes travels with St. Nicholas to dole out punishments, and sometimes he just shows up to take matters into his own hands. Krampus is invariably terrifying, as befits a demon. He wields nice whippy birch branches with which to beat naughty children. Remember, guys, this is a book. I'm just reading from accounts. Please do not turn me into AI police or anybody like that. Sometimes he uses rusty chains for those beatings. He also carries a sack for abducting the worst offenders. These reprobates are either carried off to the underworld or Krampus snarfs them down for dinner. To get on his good side, some people leave out offerings at Christmas time. Santa likes milk and cookies. Krampus prefers schnapps. Good for him. In some homes, Krampus leaves a bundle of twigs painted gold, which is hung up in the house as a reminder to children to behave. Krampus is feted on Krampusnacht, December 5th, which is the eve of St. Nicholas Day. Krampusnacht is celebrated in parts of Europe and, increasingly, parts of America too, with parades and parties. La Befana, Santa's tipsy other half. Move over, Mrs. Claus. La Befana is Southern Italy's answer to Santa. The legend of the Christmas witch says that the three wise men stopped at her cottage to ask for directions to Bethlehem. Being in Southern Italy, they were woefully off course. La Befana had the prettiest, cleanest, best-kept house in the village, and she was famed for her generous hospitality. She invited the Magi to spend the night at her cottage. Thrilled with the kind invitation, the wise men accepted. The next morning, they invited La Befana to come with them in their search for the Christ child. La Befana begged off, saying she had far too much housework to do. Houses don't clean themselves, you know. A few days after the wise men left, La Befana reconsidered their offer and decided that yes, she might like to witness the birth of the baby Jesus. Unfortunately, she had forgotten to ask where the wise men were headed. Ever since then, she has wandered the planet searching for Bethlehem, leaving toys for good children and coal, onions, and garlic for naughty ones. There is another darker origin story for La Befana. In this version, she's a mother who had been driven mad by the death of her only son. In her delirium of grief, she heard the story of the birth of Jesus and became convinced that he was the reincarnation of her own lost son. She left home and searched for him. After months of looking, La Befana found the Holy Family and gave baby Jesus all of her late son's possessions. In return, Jesus blessed La Befana and made her the honorary mother of every child in Italy. Now, her grief healed, La Befana travels the country, giving gifts to children during the Christmas season. Just like Santa Claus, La Befana enjoys a snack when she's on her rounds with a sack full of goodies. But instead of milk and cookies, she prefers a bottle of wine and boiled sausages with a side of broccoli. Although La Befana, like Santa, is a jolly sort, there is one thing you've got to remember, and that is that she doesn't like to be seen. If you catch her making her visit to your house on Christmas Eve, don't make eye contact with her, or she'll smack you in the face with her witch's broom. That's kind of scary. Frau Perchta, another witch with an unpleasant MO. Frau Perchta, hope I got it right, a character found in Germany and Austria, may be based on an ancient alpine nature goddess. She can appear as a beautiful young woman or as an old crone. Whatever her appearance, she can always be identified by the fact that one of her feet is a goose or swan foot. She hands out both rewards and punishments during the 12 days of Christmas, December 25th to January 6th. Good children can expect to get a few coins from her, but lazy folks or people who disrespect her feast day by eating something other than the prescribed foods of fish and gruel are severely punished. While she does have a bit in common with La Befana, they're both old women who leave presents for children. Frau Perchta has a vicious streak, though. Yes, she rewards the virtuous. but she also has a unique way of punishing the sinful. Huh, okay. All right, guys. She rips out their internal organs and replaces them with handfuls of rocks and straw or garbage. Blech. Saint Lucia, patron saint of the poor and blind. In Scandinavian tradition, the Christmas season is welcomed on St. Lucy's Day, December 13th. Young girls, usually the oldest daughter in the family, wake the family members with a breakfast of lusicata, currant-filled buns made golden and fragrant with saffron. The girl serves this treat to the family while wearing a crown made of holly surmounted by several lit candles. St. Lucy's Day is yet another holiday observance that emphasizes the triumph of light over darkness. In the Julian calendar, the winter solstice fell on December 13th, her feast day. St. Lucy is the Catholic patron saint of the poor and blind, and for good reason. Lucia lived in Sicily in the late 3rd century AD. A devout Christian, she longed for a life of prayerful chastity, but she faced an arranged marriage. Her husband-to-be happened to compliment Lucia's beautiful eyes, so she gouged them out and sent them to him. That'll do it, along with a note pleading for him to take what he most admired about her and to leave the rest of her alone. She was martyred in 303 AD. But Lucia has a dark side too. In legend, Lucia was identified with Adam's first wife. She dumped Adam and took the devil as her lover, spawning a host of demon children. On her feast night, the longest night of the year, animals gained the power of speech, and her infernal children were free to roam the earth. The next morning, people celebrated with a feast of breakfast buns, saffron yellow, to acknowledge the victory of the sun rising on another day. Belschnickel, Necht, Ruprecht, Ruklas, Swarte, Piet, the Dark Helpers. Belschnickel is a character from southwestern German folklore who crossed the Atlantic and now survives in Pennsylvania Dutch customs. He makes his rounds dressed in tattered clothes and raggedy furs. He visits children before Christmas as a reminder of what the season has in store for them. Like Santa Claus and Krampus combined, he carries candy to reward good children and a switch to whip bad children. In modern times, Belschnickel has mellowed and uses his whip only to make noise and remind kids that they still have time to clean up their act before Christmas. Sort of a warning shot of the bow technique. Belschnickel might have gotten his name from the German Belsen to Peter Wallop and Nickel for St. Nicholas. Net, Rupert, Piet, and Ruklas are underlings of Belschnickel and of St. Nicholas. These characters are all the heavies. Their job is to, I hate doing these words, is to beat the bad kids, I guess I'll just say it. Well, letting St. Nicholas or Belschnickel reward good children with gifts. Next, Rupert, servant, Rupert, Ruklas, and Swarte Piet, Black Peter, all made their first appearances in Germany in a German play in 1668. This was around the time of the Protestant Reformation, and the times they were changing. They were called into existence as the secular dark helpers of Christian Kindle, the infant Jesus, then responsible for the delivery of presents. Since the gentle image of the angelic Christ child could not be expected to frighten children into good behavior, menacing characters carrying switches were just the ticket. All right, we're going to stop there, and I want to thank everybody. The book is really good. You know, it gets into all this stuff. It's really it's really a neat book to read, all these legends and stuff. And you know, when you think of Belschnickel, they had Belschnickel in that Kurt Russell movie, right? That Kurt Russell movie. But anyway, I will be back next week to continue with this book, to read for another hour for you guys. But I'm glad you guys came, spent some time with me. Happy holidays. We're getting into our holidays, and just know that, you know, we're here to read some different types of holiday tales than what everybody's used to. All right. So 1 second over here at TikTok. Let me get a close out over here, and then we'll call it a day. Okay. Just sit tight. Hi, Holly. Good to see you. Couldn't tell who it was. It was Holly. All right. Anyway, guys, good night. I will be working tomorrow over on TikTok. If you want to join me over there, California Haunts. I'll be doing live tarot card readings tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. Free tarot card readings. Come on over, get your tarot read, past, present, future. Know what's coming for the holidays, and things like that. Otherwise, we'll be back to airing California Haunts Radio over on the other two networks. Probably the first of the year. We're going to have our first show in a long time, and I'm really excited about it. So we're going to get that going, get all that scheduled up. Thank you for everyone that listened in over at the other networks. I really appreciate it. And I will see you Monday. Okay? If you come over to TikTok, come on over, see me, and we'll do some readings. Let me do this really quick. All right, TikTok, thank you so much for the people that did stay and listen. I will see you guys tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. Pacific for free tarot card readings. Don't miss it. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night, TikTok. There we go. Okay. Well, again, I will see you guys tomorrow if you want to come on over at 6:30 p.m. Pacific over on TikTok. And I'll be getting this show back up at the beginning of January for sure. And we're going to enjoy it. And I'm setting up guests and everything. Getting really excited about it. And we're going to get everything back on track. Going to be doing some live ghost hunts and things like that. So come on over and we'll see you. Have a great night, everybody. And I will see you next week, 6:30 p.m. Pacific.